Hi-Fi Rush fills me with so much nostalgia. No, not for the animation style and humor that screams old shows I grew up watching before middle school in the early 2000s, like anything Nerdcorp's made, such as Stormhawks or Hot Wheels Battle Force 5. Forget that. It makes me nostalgic for the time when video games weren't terrible. Bold exaggeration, I know, but not one without some merit. Hi-Fi Rush well and truly flies in the face of every big video game to come out in the last 10 years and just laughs as it becomes a runaway success overnight while being dropped quite literally out of nowhere. One day, entirely unprompted, Tango Gameworks releases this ridiculous gem into our laps, and then walks away. Quite literally. The lead producer just left the company after this. You know, the same Tango Gameworks who made Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo. The same company whose lead producer is Shinji Mikami, the guy known for his work on Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, Vanquish, and God Hand. This is somehow a massive departure from his previous works, and yet not at the same time. And the reason I say all this is because Hi-Fi Rush is just a video game and nothing else. It has a style and format it wants to follow, and it executes that with almost perfect marks. It's a satisfying length with very few parts that feel like they did this just to pad anything out. It has a satisfactory beginning, middle, and end, and once you beat the game, it even provides you with some more stuff to do and ways of making replaying the game smoother. And that's it. It's an incredibly polished and robust game with next to no major design or technical issues to speak of. It takes a stupid concept and executes it to the best of its ability, and then once it's done, it doesn't do anything to outstay its welcome to psychologically manipulate you into continuing to play it and drop money. There are so few games that do this these days that it's just a breath of fresh air. Yes, it isn't the only example of a game to do this, especially with the bustling indie scene and some of the bigger titles out there, but everything it does stands out so much, it's become one of the best examples. More so considering it came from a studio owned by Microsoft and Bethesda. But now I'll actually get into why I feel this game is incredibly memorable, especially in today's landscape of gaming. Hi-Fi Rush is a rhythm-based character action game. Everything that occurs in this game that doesn't come from you is timed to the beat. While you have the ability to perform actions off beat, you gain less score and do less damage from doing so, and in some cases that damage can be the difference between killing an enemy in one combo or having to run back to where you launched them in order to finish them off. Past that, it's just a normal character action game, which is actually a huge compliment to how well the rhythm mechanic works for the genre, because it manages to make lights and heavies feel different, where heavies wait an extra beat due to the speed, and it naturally incorporates combos that require a slight pause in the middle by giving you an exact measurement to that wait with just a single beat. The only part of the combat that's unique because of the rhythm mechanic is that every combo ends in what's called a beat hit. This is a more delayed final hit that requires you to make an input at the exact moment to get its full effect. A successful beat hit also generates amp, which is used for special attacks. Past that, everything is standard. Your dodge works regardless of your timing, you just get more points, and you can dodge 3 times in a row if you're on beat. You get a parry that in theory works regardless of the beat, but considering enemies only ever attack on the beat, you can just listen for the beat and know exactly when you should parry. And the last part of your kit is a grappling hook that lets you pull yourself towards enemies. So as far as being a character action game goes, if you removed the rhythm mechanic, it would still be pretty damn solid on its own. There's a lot of combos for you to use, many of them have very good niche uses beyond just getting a higher score. You get lots of options for interacting with enemies, and the enemy variety is extremely solid in this game. I expected this game to be a quick 5 to 6 hour romp where they'll show you all 5 enemies in this game, and then try to mix it up just enough to not get stale. But no, this game tries its damnedest to prevent even the smallest thing from getting stale over the course of this 10 to 12 hour game, and I think it succeeds. Not only are there plenty of enemy types with their own unique mechanics that all play well together, but outside of the combat, this game likes to regularly change things up in small ways that makes those between combat events more interesting. For example, there's quite a few points in the game where you go between 2 different areas by just grappling around. At a couple points, when you're placed in a 2D perspective, the game likes to mix it up by adding an extra camera tilt to each grapple, making it a bit more entertaining. That said, they aren't exactly standout for the most part, and while it's nice to have some break between encounters, some of the things do just boil down to having an extra button to press just to move on. Really, most of what you do between encounters is either platforming or just a series of quick-time events that are only vaguely disguised. But considering you are playing a rhythm game where everything's based off timed button presses, it does get a pass. And when it comes to enemies you have to fight in this game, you have 3 main types: light, medium, and super enemies. Lights are just normal dudes who are affected by everything all the time and only really have 1 to 2 attacks. They're frail and come in large numbers, so you can get away with using AoE only combos pretty well. Medium enemies have more moves, and it's an enemy type you tend to see a lot more later in the game. They have one major stipulation from the light enemies: you can't really knock them around at all until you break their stance. By doing enough damage, you'll build up a stun meter next to them that allows for full stagger and juggle capabilities, which makes them significantly easier to deal with. However, you do have to focus your can of whoop ass on them, because if you leave them alone for even a small moment, it comes right back up. It's not really hard to break, but when you're fighting 3 medium enemies at once, all throwing their mechanics around, you can't just commit to killing one enemy. Well, at least until you get decent at air combos. I will say, one shortcoming of this game is that there's basically nothing that actually challenges you while you're in the air, so the moment a medium enemy is broken, you can just juggle them in the air endlessly, and it's practically a free kill at that point. Supers are more similar to medium enemies than not, but there's 2 major mechanical differences. First, their stance meter is more resistant to normal attacks than medium enemies, but parrying is a lot more effective. And once you bring them down to low enough health, they enter a frenzy state where you have to parry an attack flurry from this enemy. There is no way to dodge during this or really do anything. You either parry an attack or get hit. If you manage to parry every single attack, you get a prompt that allows you to instantly finish them off. But if you get hit once, the combat just goes back to normal. It is possible to whittle enemies down if you fail these QTEs enough times, but for the most part, they just stay enraged and try their attack again, so in general, you either die to their frenzy attacks, or you just finish them off right there. This is one thing I'm not a big fan of personally. It's not bad, the enemies are still fun to fight, but it feels weird that the enemies just come down to, did you pass the QuickTime event? The biggest example of this is the samurai, who is literally just fought with QuickTime events essentially. He always tries to keep his distance, it's near impossible to get it hidden without using something ranged, so you just stand there waiting for him to enter a special stance, where he'll try and counter your attacks. You wait until he's about to attack, parry him, get a couple hits before you can rinse and repeat until he enrages. Once he enrages, he'll parry everything you do to him, and will just spam a wide range flurry of attacks, then get tired so you can get some hits in. Then, once you beat him up enough, he'll do his actual frenzy attack, which is just another rhythm sequence followed by an instant kill prompt for them. And yes, it does sound weird complaining about a rhythm mechanic in a rhythm game, but this enemy above all else, it just makes it feel like I'm not really playing a spectacle fighter. Again, it's not a huge deal, since flavor-wise I do like it, and I at least respect the idea, but it's just not very satisfying knowing that all the fight comes down to in the end is a forced QTE. That said, props to the developers for taking into account the way these guys fight, and made it so that if there's any enemy left in the arena, the samurai robots will resort to ranged attacks instead. These guys would be hell to fight if you had to focus on them and the rest of the combat at the same time. There's also a few other mechanics I'm not that big of a fan of either. Some of them feel like they exist to just add a mandatory wait period and nothing else. For context, you get partner attacks. Pressing a button summons an ally to do a specific action, and early on, they are exclusively used to counter a mechanic introduced right after you get the ally. First, you get someone who fires a ranged attack to stun enemies, or to keep them juggled. Good general use. But then they introduce a mechanic where enemies have shields that you can't really touch until they break, and you can't break the shield yourself. If multiple enemies have this shield, you have to break one, wait for the attack to finish, because it does take the whole volley to break the shield, and then wait for the cooldown to take out the next one. The next power you get is a bit more general than just stunning. It's a burst of damage, but it is the only way, for most of the game, to deal with enemies who have armor plating. Not only that, it takes 2 to 3 uses of this partner to fully break one enemy's armor. Anything less, and your attacks still bounce off. It does have an AoE, but it's pretty hard to aim and requires enemies to be very close together, since its area of effect is more of a rectangle than it is a circle. Your partners can get additional attacks, giving them a lot more uses, but for a while you are just stuck with use X to get over X undamageable effect. The third partner is the only example of these working as less of a hard counter. They shoot a gust of wind that puts out all fires, firewalls from enemies, fire-coated weapons, and it's luckily not required to deal with them, but it makes your life easier. Plus, it makes enemies take more stun damage, which is actually insane how useful it is due to how many supers you'll be fighting by this point. Your only other option for bypassing the shields is by using your special attacks, which cost meter, and sometimes you'll be doing this even if you normally wouldn't want to use this power, just to avoid having to wait. And the only other option is a special move you get in the last quarter of the game that lets you jump behind enemies with armor-plated shields, just to get a few free hits from behind. It doesn't fix the fully armored enemies, but those are much less common. Now, granted, you do lose your special meter after each combat, so you might as well use it, unless you're going for a high score, that is. But it's another case of this game just not feeling very satisfying, because I'm now resorting to a move not because it'll help me out of a bad situation, but just because I don't feel like waiting to just deal with this game's mechanic. And it makes the uncommon targeting issues just that little bit more annoying when you want to target an enemy with a shield, but your partner just shoots a random non-shielded enemy and now you have to wait for the cooldown. The cooldown is short, but this game is relatively fast, so the waiting just feels long. The only instance of the shield mechanic working well is with one enemy who just throws a shield-emitting spear onto the ground. Break it and all the shields are gone. Simple and fun. And that's really my only issue with the game. Even then, it's just an annoyance that becomes less of an issue the more options you get. The only other annoyance is that in the last few stages, the game throws fire enemies at you, where any hit requires you to spam movement controls to break free, which makes it so that you're inclined to spam wind on everything, or else every time you get hit, it's just going to be a stun. Granted, I was already spamming wind because holy fuck, that increased stun damage is insane. And speaking of this game being fast, I'm actually surprised how fast it was. It's not the fastest spectacle fighter out there, but it's surprisingly chaotic. It's like the devs understood that there's enough leniency in the game's rhythm mechanic that they can make it play pretty fast and be fairly hard while not frying your brain trying to keep up with everything. Really, the only benefit you get from trying to play this game at peak efficiency is a score bonus and more money per encounter. And I'll be honest and say I didn't really try that hard to get a high score. I wanted to, but with the game's speed, the rhythm mechanics, and all the combos you have to remember, I would often just end up spamming full light and full heavy combos and getting away with it pretty well. Getting a high score grade per encounter is actually really tough. You get a negative score multiplier for a few seconds whenever you get hit, or if you use the same move over and over again. You get bonus points for kills while you're on a hit streak, and also bonuses that last a small period of time for attacks that launch enemies into the air or grappling to them. So actually maximizing your score multiplier is pretty intensive, and I absolutely love that. But at the same time, you can just button mash your way through the game and be just fine. It'll take longer, and that's kind of it. That's what I sure as fuck did, because this game is a lot for my brain to handle, especially while streaming it, dear god. It's a pretty good practice for having to split your attention between complex actions and making commentary, and then proceeding to fail for 13 hours. Oh, and one huge tip I'll give. If you keep wondering why you can never get aerial combos off like I did, well, this is why. This fucking setting right here. Turn it off. It's on by default and will turn your heavy attack into a slam that cancels your lift and combo, so long as you hit the aerial heavy attack button while holding any movement input. Naturally, when I'm doing combos, I'll usually just be holding forward, even if I'm in the air, so this messed with me way too much. So that's the gameplay. Not too in-depth by my usual standards, but that's largely because spectacle fighters are relatively simple games to understand. It's just the application that makes them really engaging and difficult. But the real reason I want to talk about this game is its presentation. It is absolutely phenomenal. First, and most obviously, the art in this game is just incredible. It doesn't yet break the barrier between something 3D looking 2D in motion, but in still images, it caught me off guard a few times. I bet you thought you were staring at a drawing, weren't you? Well, guess what? It rotates! Then there are character designs, which are all just really silly looking masses of bright colors. Every character here is super busy in the best ways, where pretty much every part of their body has some flair added to it. Most importantly, it does this while actually looking good. Making something look great while being over-designed is pretty hard, but this game manages to make everything look pretty damn cool. Even better, it doesn't extend to the enemies. They're all fairly simple designs with standout shapes that are easy to read at a glance. And by god, this game knows how good its art is. The amount of times that it will just take you to an area, present you with an absolutely massive, detailed, and colorful landscape, and then make some excuse for you to get a glimpse of the absolute scale of all this, is enough times that I'm convinced this game knows it's hot shit and is just bragging at this point. And it's not just subtly showing you a nice skybox as you walk by, it's making sure you know damn well how good this game looks. And past the art is the animations. Everything is so wonderfully animated with just a low enough frame rate during cutscenes to further drive home how well this game mimics older 3D cartoons. I almost want to say it's intentionally animated like this because not only are animations in gameplay silky smooth, but there's a number of cutscenes where the animations become a lot smoother than others just for emphasis. If that wasn't enough to show the chops this studio has, they also throw in 2D animation as well, and by God, it looks really well done. All I could think about while playing this game is how much this would define my childhood if this game was a cartoon when I was a kid. That's how good I feel the animation and style of this game is. And boy, does it not end here. When I said this game has style, it has style. Looking good is one thing, but it's the details that really elevate something to greatness. Your entire environment moves in time with the beat of the music. Machinery, sometimes foliage, all sorts of background elements are all moving with the music. Chai himself walks to the beat of the music. When standing still, he snaps his fingers, allowing you to see the beat. This game gives so many in-world references for where the beat is that I never once used the top left corner or your companion, 808, to get the timing down. I either saw how enemies moved, since they attack on the beat exclusively, saw something in the environment, or in the case of heavy attacks, there's a clap sound that Chai makes indicating the beat made during the attack animation. Of course, for the most part, I use the music itself, but sometimes when I get off track, I found it a lot easier to get back on the beat than other rhythm lights, as I'll call them. I also feel it does a better job with the rhythm mechanics than other games like Hellsinger or BPM, because it makes enemies time their attacks to the beat of the music a lot better than those. In Hellsinger and BPM, it felt like so long as you dodged to the beat, you would avoid the majority of damage passively. But in this game, since it's a different genre and those rules still apply, it doesn't work out the same way. Sure, if you're dodging on every beat, you'll avoid attacks, but you also aren't dealing damage. Since you can always cancel an action with a dodge or parry, it allows you to see an attack coming, and instead of finishing your combo, you can hit parry or dodge to the beat that you'd expect the enemy's attack to come out on. This takes it from feeling like you're the only one timing your actions to the beat to everything is playing by the same rules, and that even if you zone out, if you just keep that rhythm going, you can react to nearly anything that gets thrown your way, at least early on. The later game gets real hectic, and that's something I actually did. I straight up zoned out during an encounter, my eyes just unfocused on the screen, and I was just reacting based on seeing movement and then timing my dodge with the beat. It sounds dumb as hell, but it kind of felt great, and it's the moment that sold me on how well the rhythm mechanic played with this genre. But going back to the style, it's not just the environments that move with the music. Even the action in the cutscenes are choreographed to match the music, and as a result, there are some very standout moments. It's amazing how much effort they put into synchronizing with the music in this game. It also has a lot of fun particle effects, like the classic comic book exclamation text when you hit things, but I can't overstate how well it's done. It's more than just saying boom next to every explosion, or bap when you smack someone. Details like sending someone flying into the air with a trailing letter A as they explode into fireworks, or throwing your guitar into the ground and unleashing a hilariously bright-colored explosion are all small touches that help this game avoid cliche style choices for this specific style. And that's easily this game's strong suit. It goes the extra mile in every way. Almost nothing in this game is surface level. 808, for example, is your cat companion. He helps you keep the rhythm by pulsing to the beat. 808 can also be read as Bobcat. Or 808 is also a drum machine that can help with timing a rhythm. Also, 808 makes all these absolutely adorable bleeps and bloops when they move around that sound like they were taken from the 808 machine itself. 808 is also a robot cat that is used as a communication and transfer device for your party. On its own, it just acts like a silly cartoon cat, but depending on who's talking through it, the way 808 moves and emotes closely matches whoever's talking. Also, at the start of the game, Chai touched the cat and caused a host synchronization effect with the cat, and pretty much from that point on, the cat basically becomes Chai when no one's talking through it, and is more than happy to take part in every last stupid idea Chai has that no other human or robot in this game wants to be a part of. As another example, there's a character who accounts for 80% of this game's references. half of its animations are just poses from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but it doesn't just stop there. The game will go as far as to do various visual gags in several different styles to accompany many of the poses, and it even breaks the fourth wall a bit by having the character interact with the effects on screen. I'm sure some will think it's tacky, but not only does it fit the character, but the extra effort makes the references actually feel earned rather than just saying, hey look, it's the JoJo pose. Like, it is doing that, but with so much flair, you can't really be angry, can ya? 808 also has a special move where they do cute things and stun the entire arena. However, this is absolutely useless against bosses. But, instead, you're rewarded with a special line of dialogue from that boss. Even though it's not unlocked till much later, you can even go back to a previous boss fight and use it to get special dialogue. Sure, it's only one line, but it's still that extra thought that really makes it memorable. Hell, the game even gives you special dialogue taking the piss out of you for quitting the game in the room right before the final boss and how what you did killed the momentum. This game is simply filled to the brim with details like that. All these acknowledgements of whatever weird situation the player tries to throw at it. Stuff like that and how every NPC has their own dialogue for being slapped with your guitar shows that whoever made this game wanted nothing else in the world than for this game to be the best it can be. And without even reading up on the story of how this game is made, I could feel the passion the devs had. A game with this much love and attention put into it while also managing to be a very good game in itself is rare and something that you can really feel the effort of. On top of all this, the humor somehow manages to land nearly every time. I don't know if it's that the writing style is perfect for my childish as hell brain, or if the constant physical abuse Chai gets with the slapstick animations, but something in this game just kills me with every single line that is spoken. Though I know that's a lot more subjective, since most people I know really hate Chai as a protagonist and find his humor to be lame, but something about Chai as a character just connects with me so hard. He has a broken arm and decided the next best step was to get it amputated and replaced with a robot arm. And that's the smartest thing he does the entire game. Chai is the living embodiment of my last brain cell, and I love him. And I wish that was the end of all I have to say about this game, but there is so much more. Once you beat the game, that's not the end. Well, it can be if you just wanted a satisfying conclusion to a game and move on. Its ending is great. However, once you beat the game, it adds a few extra features that make replaying the game for completionists a lot more engaging. All the way as far back as the first stage of this game, there were secrets you couldn't get to until halfway through the game because you didn't have the right partner, and another set of secrets that the characters can comment on throughout the game that just aren't accessible until you beat the game. This allows you to play through the levels and try and get that illustrious S rank in every encounter, while letting you be on the lookout for things you couldn't access before. You're also offered a chip that helps you locate secret items easier, and if you're just going through the levels to find the post-game challenge rooms that are opened up, you can freely complete them, and then when leaving, you can go back to the hideout instead of continuing with the level. But if that's not your thing, one character offers you an endless combat mode, which has you fighting tons of different encounters, and even previous boss fights, but on a time limit that increases with each enemy you kill. You can also do this on a new difficulty, where you instantly fail if your score drops below a D, which doesn't sound that much harder since I don't think my score ever dropped below a B, for the most part. All you really get from this challenge tower is the currency, gears, so you might be wondering what the purpose of that is now that you beat the game. Sure, you can go back and buy all the upgrades you missed, but beating the game unlocks an entirely new feature on top of all the others. You can customize your entire crew, and holy shit do they give you a lot of customization options. Entire outfits, lots of small shirts, guitar redesigns, you can decorate all your partners, and even 808. So while you're out there being a completionist, you can just dump your spare currency into these cosmetics. It's such a nice extra addition. You can't buy any of this for real money. It's just there to make the post-game feel even more complete by not letting currency be meaningless after you beat the game, despite the fact that something like this really didn't need to exist, period. I also love how challenges such as parry X number of enemies or killing X number of enemies not only gives you a reward, but adds to this mural in your hideout. Again, nothing is ever really just one layer deep with this game. It's really trying to be the best game it could be, and seeing these collections of small details, it makes me really happy. So, that's Hi-Fi Rush. You might be thinking why I didn't at any point talk about the music in this rhythm game, and that's because this game is so good, I played it from start to end on very hard, even though I really didn't care for the music. Like, it's good, but it doesn't get me hyped for the action the same way other rhythm games I've played have been able to, or hell, most other games in general. The only standout tracks I would say is the music for the final level. It's incredible and very fitting. If you play with streamer mode on, which replaces licensed music with custom tracks made by the devs, which is another amazing feature, turn it off for the last level. Believe me, it's worth it. So I really hope this game is a massive blowout success and convinces developers to pump out more small passion projects like this. My favorite games of all time are weird low-budget shorter titles from medium-sized studios because they aren't designed by a focus group or doing whatever is in these days. And seeing games come out of nowhere and not only be excellent, complete, and bug-free, but also popular? It fills me with hope.